Hello and welcome to another episode of 0 to 60. On today's video, the main thing that we want to achieve is compare the two sort of latest devices for acceleration times that are currently available. That's the VBox Sport and the Dragy, and see how they differ in accuracy, what we think is more accurate. But before I get into that, I also want to give you guys a bit of a background on why David and myself have been so obsessed with acceleration times and why the channel exists. And that story starts back in 2005 or 2006 when we first purchased our first timing device. Even back then, it was quite obvious that you couldn't record a speedo for any sort of semi-reliable data on how a car is accelerating. Now, the device we purchased is what we always referred to as a G-Tech. It was made by Tesla Electronics, and they were a relatively cheap device that used the G-sensor inside them to measure 0 to 60 mile an hour or quarter mile times. And that's why we've ended up calling the channel 0 to 60, because back in the day, that's what we used to do, just 0 to 60 runs, even though we're in Australia. Now, these devices were pretty good. They give you a good level of comparison, but you could trick them to a degree. Now, to get them to work, you had to have the device perfectly level. And when you mounted it on your windscreen, you could either go, I think, 2 degrees up or down, and that would affect your times, making them either slower or faster. So they were good for comparing your own times, but comparing your G-Tech times to somebody else, you'd never known if they'd fudged their results. I actually did my very first YouTube video back in 2006 on this, on my turboed Explorer, which I might cut in a little bit here and you can see, but it was good for that because that vehicle, when I got it, I was doing around 10-second 0 to 60s. When I turboed it, I dropped that down to 7.75 seconds. So I was pretty impressed with that back in 2006. Moving on from that point there, we actually got rid of that when the Dynalicious app for the iPhones came out. And if you've been following the channel for a while, we used Dynalicious for a lot of our timed runs between 2016 and 2017. The Dynalicious app worked on the same principle. It was just a G meter. Now, we started using it because we saw Matt Farah actually compare it to a drag strip drag time, and it was fairly accurate. It wasn't exactly the same as the drag strip, but it was as close as makes no difference in reality. The big thing about the Dynalicious app, where you had to level out and get the G-Tech to be perfectly level, with Dynalicious it would reset the phone's G meter. So as long as the phone was clamped solid, you'd end up with a pretty accurate time, and you couldn't fudge Dynalicious. Moving on from Dynalicious, the real automotive journalists, they switched to a Generation 1 VBox, or they might have been called a VBox 2, but it was basically VBox's device, and I'll put a picture up here of it. And that did, to my knowledge, use GPS and a G meter to combine your acceleration time. They've been used in the automotive industry heavily, and I'm sure you guys would have seen them in other channels over the time. That got replaced by VBox's VBox Sport. Now, this worked on the same principle as the VBox 2. It is GPS and G meter based. However, they basically got rid of the screen. It's a smaller device and you run it through an app, which gives you a little bit more control, a bit better logging of your times. And that's what we've been using since 2017. We really like the VBox. In the industry, it's regarded as the thing to have. The only thing I don't like about it is the way it records its times, and even just all the looking through previous runs is a bit half-assed. These VBox exist, they're used in a lot of race teams. They are not cheap devices, anything VBox. They do a lot of telemetry components for race cars. But it's just not a brilliant app, but it does do the job. We've been using it, very happy with it. Now the Dragy, these have been out for about 4 or 5 years now, I believe. Super cheap device, it's about a quarter of the price of the VBox. The app is much better to use, and they've done a little bit more intuitive thinking in the design of the app, which makes it easier to share your Dragy times. I'm sure you've also seen people's Dragy overlay over their phone recording. But I wanted to test these two. They're supposed to be pretty accurate. Let's go and do some timed runs and see how they compare. All right, guys, we'll see you in a second. So before we head out, I just wanted to show you how we've mounted the Dragy. The Dragy actually comes with magnets that you're supposed to stick somewhere, but in order to keep it accurate, we've actually got it wedged in here, and although there's a little bit of movement, that's probably the least amount of movement we're going to get. And we've got the VBox mounted on the supplied VBox mount. Again, a little bit of movement, but very minimal. So again, just trying to get it as consistent as possible. Let's go and do these runs, Dave. Let's do it. Okay, guys, so this is going to be the first test. Dave's got the VBox. I've got the Dragy. Everything's screen recording. I've got a GoPro on the Android. Start. Ready? It's ready. Oh, she hooked up. She hooked up. Oh, she's great. So, Dragy's got 100 time. everything got a time apart from the... Oh no, Android did get a time.
Yeah,
8
seconds flat. What did you get on the Draggy?
Draggy got 7.7.
Okay, VBox got 7.86.
Okay, alright. Let's do another
Shall
one.
we try again?
You're right to restart the Android.
Can do. That's that. You ready?
Ready?
Oh, no.
Oh, let's see what it does. Not a fast time, but
Oh.
lots of wheel spin.
Lots of wheel spin. But it'd be good to see the variation when on a slower time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I've got everything.
Yep.
And you wouldn't believe it.
8 seconds flat. That likes that 8 seconds flat, doesn't it? VBox got 8.53.
The Draggy got 8.43. So the Draggy is slightly optimistic at this point in time.
Shall we try again?
Yeah, just make sure everything's still recording.
Start.
We're good to go. That was a good start. And I got all my times. Alright, that's probably going to be enough. We need to go back to the office and work out what the speedo recorded.
Yeah, and then see how much... 8 seconds again on the bloody Talk app. How stupid.
Alright, we'll see you guys in a second.
So guys, I'm editing the video and just going through and checking all the times. Now I just wanted to show you quickly to work out the speedometer times, which are these ones that we're using here. I've just zoomed right in with Final Cut and got the exact time codes which Final Cut displays here on that section there. And if we switch over to here, these are the actual times that we've got for the day. So run 1, let's start with that one. Actually, I'll just show you the way we've laid it out. We've got run 1, run 2, run 3, and then we've got the times for the VBox and the Draggy. I've listed the difference. Now the camera that's on the Speedo, that is this section here. We've got the time code where the Speedo starts moving, and then when it gets to the middle of either the 100 or the 60 or the 120 mark. So what that's related to, we have, starting over here, the first run, the VBox for the 0 to 100 was 7.86 and the Draggy was 7.71. So the Draggy was 1.9% faster and the Speedo got a 7.5, so 4.3% faster. The 60 to 120 was 7.19 and the Draggy was 7.17, so 0.2%. So they're pretty similar on those two times. Where we did get a big variance, and across all three runs, was for the quarter mile, the eighth of a mile. The VBox was 10.26 and the Draggy was 9.8, which means the Draggy was 4% faster. We didn't actually have the ability to do the distance on the Speedo cam. Now looking at the run 2, similar results for the first one. The Draggy was 1.1% faster, the Speedo was 6% faster. The 60 to 120, however, on the second run, the Draggy, interestingly, was slower this time. So the VBox was more optimistic, and the 1/8 mile, similar results to the first one, the Draggy was 3.1% faster times. Run 3, for the 0 to 100, the VBox was 7.87 and the Draggy was 7.9. Now that is very, very similar times. The difference being 0.38% slower for the Draggy. The 60 to 120 was also slower for the Draggy at 0.5%, and then the 8th mile, again, bizarrely, was slower on the VBox. So the Draggy was faster at 3.76%. I'll flash these times up on your screen. But yeah, basically here you can see all the green times, the Draggy is faster, all the red times, the VBox is faster, and then you can see the percentage differences and how that relates into which one has the variance. Something I can't remember if I mentioned at the intro to this video, but the OBD timer that we used in the Android unit was so inaccurate, I've just completely ignored its times. It basically just said 8 seconds, regardless of what we did. Also, you can see in the Speedo camera, we've got on the IKE display, we've got the Speedo readings from the Android as well. Now, for some reason, that was a different reading to what displayed on the Android and a different reading to what displayed on the Speedo. So it's just interesting how this BMW has 3 different speed readings being thrown at you all the time. things I'm going to take away from this, the difference between the V-Box and the Dragy for the 0 to 100 runs is here nor there. That difference isn't enough to really be an issue. One thing that was surprising was the 1/8 of a mile difference. The V-Box is always slower than the Dragy. Not sure how I think about that. We've been using the V-Box for a bit over 2 years now. Like I said earlier, in the industry they're generally regarded as a pretty accurate device, and again they do a lot of motorsport stuff where the Dragy is relatively new. What do you guys think is the best? What do you want to see us keep using on the channel, the Dragy or the V-Box? There's probably not much in it. I kind of like the interface of the Dragy. The Dragy is much easier to use and much faster. There's a lot less time involved in setting it up. Yeah. I hope you found these results interesting. One thing you've got to take away from it, don't ever time your speedo. It's just not a good way to see how fast you're really going or how fast your 0 to 100 time is, unless you're trying to do back-to-back comparisons for yourself. But to time your speedo and then putting it on the internet and use it as a benchmark is just silly. Definitely worth getting either a V-Box or a Dragy. All right guys, look, thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it as always, and we'll catch you on the next one.